Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the next installment of the Leadership Dialogue series. At the Community and Membership Engagement Subcommittee, we focus on addressing the challenges and concerns of our fellow early career scientists by facilitating team building activities and also creating networking opportunities for members of the entire early career leadership program cohort. And we're excited to organize this series to highlight the role of effective leadership in research. And we're inviting recognized scientific leaders from both academia and industry to share their thoughts on what being a leader means to them and the qualities needed to be an effective leader in science. And these discussion sessions will be available on YouTube, so early career scientists in the GSA and beyond can access and benefit from them. And through this series, we aim to promote conversations about the importance of good leadership in academic research and how it can significantly impact laboratory cultures and the global scientific communities. And we would like to start with a brief introduction. So we will introduce ourselves and we will then continue on to introduce Dr. Johnson. My name is Li Shu He. I was a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Arizona in Tucson.
My name is Rebecca. I'm currently a PhD student at the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria.
Hello, my name is Rehan and I'm a PhD candidate at Kansas State University.
Hi, my name is Stella. I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Georgia.
So, all of us are so excited to introduce everyone that's listening today to Dr. Tracy Johnson as our next interviewee for this series. Dr. Tracy Johnson has held a huge number of different leadership positions, so I'm trying to make the introduction brief so it doesn't take up all of our time. But she completed her PhD in molecular biology at the University of California, Berkeley, before she moved further down the coast to Pasadena, where she conducted her postdoc at Caltech. Currently, Dr. Johnson is the Keith and Cecilia Terasaki Presidential Endowed Chair in the Life Sciences at the University of California, Los Angeles. She is also both a professor of molecular cell and developmental biology at UCLA and formerly a Howard Hughes Medical Institute professor. In September 2020, she was named Dean of the UCLA Division of Life Sciences. While at UCLA, Dr. Johnson developed the UCLA HHMI Pathways to Success program, which provides students with an authentic research experience early in their academic careers. Dr. Johnson also has close ties to the Genetic Society of America, as she has served as the past GSA Vice President and President in 2023. The Johnson Lab at UCLA investigates mechanisms of eukaryotic RNA processing, particularly pre-mRNA splicing. They often use yeast to determine how the cell synthesizes, splices, and processes RNA to regulate its gene expression. We're so fortunate and excited to have Dr. Johnson here today with us, and we're really looking forward to speaking with her. So we'll move right along into our first questions, and we'll start with Rehan.
Yeah, so Dr. Tracy, so over a period of time, you have held many leadership roles. And so I wanted to ask you, like, how would you define a scientific leadership and how it has evolved over time? And if we look at the current scientific climate around us, what like the external pressures we as a scientist are facing in today's time?
Well, thank you for that question. And I just want to start by saying how honored I am to have a chance to be in conversation with you all. And the GSA is an amazing community, and the ECLP is, I think, a fantastic way of bringing early career scientists together to think about what does it mean to be leaders in not only genetics, but in the scientific community in general. So thank you for this opportunity. I guess I should step back and just think about how to define leadership more generally. And I think I'm being consistent with Webster's if I say that leadership is really the ability to facilitate others or a group to achieve a common goal. And so scientific leadership is going to be defined by whatever that goal is. And this has certainly become more complicated by the fact that the role of scientists and scientific leaders has evolved just because our portfolio of what it is that we do as scientists has evolved. So you can be a leader, there could be leadership of a lab where the common goal is a research project or leadership of an organization like GSA, or leader of a division like life sciences, where it's a multifaceted goal of teaching students, enabling research, and helping to support public impact. So many of us are content experts. All of us here think about particular scientific questions. But honestly, that isn't what makes us a leader. It's really the qualities that are associated with good leadership and the ability to bring out those common goals. And ECOP acknowledges that. That's part of the reason why I'm so honored to be here. So I'm sure we'll get into some of the details of what we mean by the qualities of leadership. But hopefully that answers the first question of kind of what is scientific leadership, and particularly at this moment where what we're doing as scientists, we have to really reimagine it so that we can make sure that we can sustain the scientific enterprise. And so I'm excited to talk more about the details of kind of characteristics of leaders.
Thank you very much for that answer. So I'm going to be asking the next question. And I think this is quite an important question at a time like this, where there's a lot of policy change, policy shifts, in science and how it affects international collaborations. So my question is, we know that international collaboration is very vital to, science, the pillar of science, across the world. Yet currently it faces a lot of hurdle, looking at it from the foundational part where it may be graduate students down to collaborations in different spheres of life or different, part of the world. So what are your current thoughts now, and how do you think we can foster and, protect this productive collaborations that we have at international levels in the field of science?
Oh, you're right. It's such an important question, especially right now. I think, to state the obvious, science knows no borders. And the success of science comes from collaboration and leveraging different perspectives. There is actually really excellent literature about this. There was a paper published, I guess it was probably about a decade ago, that looked at over 2 million papers. It was published in Nature across many disciplines. And it looked at papers that were authored by different scientists from different backgrounds and countries and ethnicities, and showed that the highest citations, one measure of impact, the most impactful work comes from those papers that were published by labs or by groups that had different backgrounds and cultures represented in the authors. So I think that just says that it goes to your question that having a productive engagement in partnerships and international collaborations is so important. So how do we foster that? I think there are a couple of things that, as a scientific community, we really do have to seek out ways and to develop and foster engagement across borders. So examples of that might be meetings with an international audience, or editorial boards with international presence, international scientific organizations. And creating these has to be intentional, right? Because if you have an international community, but the meeting is only in one particular country, it isn't really leveraging the opportunity to make something accessible for international engagement. So things like scholarships to allow for international travel, and really thinking about the representation of the participants in all of those spheres. So if you'll allow me to, this is something we're really grappling with in the US right now. And if you allow me to look at this from that perspective, I think it really illustrates what's necessary. I think one of the greatest strengths of American science has been our ability to attract extraordinary talent from all over the world, such that scientists can work in groups and problem solve together. And so it's really critical that we protect the mechanisms for attracting scientists from all over the world, both structurally and also by creating a welcoming scientific culture. So policies that put up barriers to that are going to have, I fear, a really devastating impact on the exchange of ideas and nurturing these talent communities in the US. And so I think as a community, it's really incumbent upon us to make sure we tell the story of how critical to the entire scientific enterprise it is that we maintain mechanisms for continued engagement internationally, but also welcoming scientists to the US from all over the world.
Yes, I totally agree, Dr. Johnson. That's like the impactful change and the concept of just team science in general really needs like active engagement of scientists, funders of all levels, to really accurately reflect the scientific knowledge that we have the honor of having, and also sustain that kind of report for innovation. I guess as a
Absolutely.
follow-up, yeah, could you offer some insights on the impact of this unprecedented time with fluctuations and uncertainties in public funding, just funding in general, on the ecosystem of science altogether, in addition to the diversity of engagement we have had in the past? That could mean like training pipelines, risk-taking, or even institutional priorities.
I think it's a question that all of us have to be thinking about. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge really how forward-looking the strategy of federally funded research really was. I mean, this came from a period of time around World War II where the head of the Office of Scientific Research and Development prepared a report for the president at the time. And as we were coming out of the World War, it was clear that, and this was articulated in that report, that basic research was going to be the engine for innovation, for prosperity, for healing the psyche and restoring the nation's ability to really confront the big challenges, and that was going to be only possible through a partnership, through a public partnership with universities and other scientific organizations, but that it was going to be a sort of a public commitment. And it's been an excellent proposition because, it's estimated that 99% of the drugs that are approved by the FDA have come about because of federal funding, largely to universities. So, as an institution, I know my institution has been really quite hard hit by federal funding suspensions and changes in the federal funding priorities. And the impact is that, that research gets lost. Remember, 99%. That is the impact that's at risk here. So any person who has cancer in remission, or anyone who has a child that was born with a devastating genetic disease, like, I think about splicing research, and one of the diseases that we have been able to confront based on our understanding of basic research is a disease called spinal muscular atrophy. So anybody who's been affected at this level by any of these diseases, that the ability to confront those has been because of federal funding. So that is what's at stake. One of the most devastating consequences, I think, in the fluctuations in funding has been something that you mentioned in your question, which is the impact on training. We've seen a suspension of training grants, so it's pulled the rug out from underneath trainees who've committed to scientific exploration. It sends a message that what they're doing is not going to be supported. And so what I really worry about is I worry about the future of science as being attractive to the next generation of scholars who all of that innovation is going to be dependent on. And so, what it says to me is that of our role as scientific leaders, and I kind of consider all of us in this conversation in that role of facilitating others to achieve a common goal of scientific innovation. there are a couple of things we have to do, and one of them is we have to really do a better job of telling the story of how science is done, how it drives discovery, engaging each other and the public and our leaders so that they know what's at stake, because the stakes are enormous right now.
Wholeheartedly agree with this. I attended actually UCLA for my bachelor's. So even though I'm across
Oh.
the ocean, yeah, I'm still following kind of the science there quite closely. And recently I saw that they had this suspended research project science fair where there
Mm.
were kind of, at least from the Instagram stories that I'm able to view from over here, like hundreds and hundreds of posters of really amazing work and impactful scientific research. And yeah, it's quite sad to see how much this fluctuation and uncertainty in public funding really affects the people that are trying to make a difference within the labs.
I think, if
But
I may, I think one of the things
Mhm.
about that, sorry to interrupt, one of the
No.
things about that, I'm so glad you mentioned that particular activity, because there were so many um, postdocs and graduate students and people in the kind of at the beginning of incredible careers who were there to just talk about what it is that they're doing in the labs. And sometimes we're so busy in our own research enterprise that we forget to have those conversations, even with each other, but certainly outside of the labs. And and I was excited to see just how many people were interested in knowing what it is that we're doing at UCLA. And I think it told a really important story that when, you read in the LA Times that federal funding is suspended, I think it's important to know, like, what does that really mean? And what does society at large lose, not just the individual investigators? So thank you for mentioning
Mhm.
that. I'm glad that you were able to see that activity.
Yeah, definitely. I think seeing this kind of fair and having that put on was super important. So kind of now we kind of transitioned a bit already into a more positive light without dwelling solely on all these really negative and difficult times. But are there kind of branching off more specific strategies and leadership that you think would be most effective for navigating these complexities and trying to maintain focus on discovery and on training within science?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think about, kind of who is that question meant for? And I so appreciate, I'm kind of deeply honored that you're asking me. And at the same time, I think that as we consider our collective roles as leaders, and depending on what it is that we're excited about, like what are the qualities that we are all needing now as scientists to develop? I saw a statistic that there are less than, at least in the US, less than 2% of the population would consider themselves scientists. So almost just by nature of the numbers, that means all of us are potentially in a position of leadership. So to your question, what are the kind of qualities that would be important for a leader? And I thought about this a lot, and I could say there are probably three that jump to mind, and that there's also um, literature about kind of what is effective leadership that I think is consistent with these three qualities. I think one is self-reflection. And so we sort of have to look internally to figure out what our core values are, what motivates us, what are our strengths, and what are our blind spots, because as we know, the work to do now is significant, but each of us has to leverage where our own energy can best be deployed in order to be effective as leaders. So the first is sort of understanding ourselves and what motivates us, what we're excited about. It's that self-reflection. I think the second is curiosity. And, we know about scientific curiosity, but also being curious about others, being curious about other science, being curious about the public and the public's perception. That'll allow us to be, empathetic and compassionate, but also to be able to engage authentically with each other in the scientific community, but also to be able to engage authentically outside of our own scientific ecosystem. similar to what you described with these activities. And I think it's absolutely crucial at this moment to, as scientific leaders, to do that. And I think the third is this particular time that we're in requires us to be courageous. Leading a university, leading a movement, talking to the public, engaging with students, all of this, particularly in challenging times, but always in the best of times, leaders will have to be willing to take risks and do things that are values driven, but may not necessarily be popular. So I'd say those are the three qualities that feel really important for leaders at the moment and in general. And scientific leaders specifically. So you asked a question about strategies. So what are the kind of strategies that are important? And I think one that strikes me is to really find a community of like-minded people, right? Because if you're finding what your own passion is, you're introspective, you're curious, then finding a community will help remind us of what's worth fighting for and what is motivating us to step into sometimes challenging leadership roles. So those communities are really important. And it even goes to that other quality, which is, courage. I heard this expression that courage is contagious. And so if we're in a community where people are really thinking about and motivated by similar values, then that is something that's going to help us be able to move whatever it is that we're stepping into leadership to do, move it forward. And then finally, I think one of the things that's really obvious, and I know the ECLP thinks a lot about this, is how can we, what is one of the strategies is developing communication skills, ability to communicate with each other and with the public. And so there's the qualities, I think, that for leadership for us to develop. And then there's some of the strategies for deploying those qualities. Sort of, I hope that answers your question. That's kind of how I've been thinking about what does leadership look like right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with the three qualities that you told us, the self-reflection, the curiosity, and the courage. These are something that defines a true leadership. So, Dr. Tracy, you are currently a co-PI for the UCLA's Iraqda program, and one of our previous guests, Dr. Teresa Lee, she was like an Iraqda recipient at her postdoc, and they spoke very well of this program. So we wanted to ask you, like in your opinion and experience, like with advising Iraqda at UCLA, how does the award specifically prepare the fellows for the leadership roles, like navigating through complex environments or advocating for science or like fostering excellence even in difficult times? Like how do that program prepare them?
First of all, I used to be the co-director of the Iraqda program. There's a new current director who's fantastic, and I love that you interviewed Dr. Lee. I'm a big fan, and she's I think the work that she's done is so impressive. So unfortunately our Iraqda program is suspended. So this is one of those times where you realize the impact of something because it's in a state of limbo, and you get to reflect on what you're missing. So here's what I love about the program, though. It treats education like we treat science, that there are evidence-based practices for doing things well. And in this case, there are evidence-based practices for having excellence in pedagogy. And Iraqda not only believes in that, but also has that embedded in the structure of the program. And so there's pedagogy training and then practice integrating the teaching and effective pedagogy with the other things that we do as scientists. How do you manage your time? How do you support mentoring while recognizing that there is a skill to teaching and educating. The other thing that Iracta does really effectively is that it builds a community, not only at an individual institution, but across institution of people with a common goal of being exceptional researchers and educators. I mean, it sounds bold, right? It's an ambitious goal, and it's wonderful to be in a community of people who share that ambitious goal, and you see it happening across different Iracta programs. And I think the third thing that the Iracta program supports is it helps scientists and future professors understand how to nurture talent. And what I mean by that is, our students come to us with a rich diversity of backgrounds and experiences. And the Iracta program helps educators think about the best way of maximizing the experiences of these students in order to have impactful teaching. And because you can recognize the richness of what's possible. But there is a talent to that. And so Iracta builds in training of how do you identify the needs and the talents of students, and how do you use data to inform pedagogy and culture and structure in order to best support students. So I think that when you think about that, it's exactly what we want our universities to be. Places where you have amazing opportunities, where you educate and create opportunities for scientific development, but also you figure out how to support great research at the same time. And that's what the Iracta programs do.
It is a shame that the program was suspended. It just, from my personal experiences, I've seen folks in my scientific networks that I felt could benefit so much from programs like this. And a lot of us never had the training of what to do in terms of sustaining the science that we want to do. There's so much that goes beyond just doing the experiments and trying to figure out the data. If we want to mentor students, it's a whole nother can of worms, I guess.
Yeah.
But I
Oh,
guess
absolutely. I mean, absolutely. If I could just kind of follow up on that, it's amazing to me. Like if somebody wants to do cryo-EM, you don't just put them in a facility and expect them to figure it out, right? I mean, but that's kind of what we do with professors, with teachers, who sort of say, okay, you understand how transcription works. So here's a classroom of 150 students, and I'm sure you'll be just fine. And so I think what Iracta does is it recognizes that, you know, there are skills that are learnable and teachable. And if there are ways of optimizing the talent that comes to us as professors, or optimizing the opportunity to develop talent that comes to us as professors. So anyway, as opposed to letting it happen kind of by osmosis or by accident, the Iracta program is one of those programs that's really intentional about what does it mean to be an academic.
I had hoped that the talent teaching will like come to me via osmosis, but it never happens. But I wanted to ask you, like, since we're on the topic of, developing these skills as
Mm,
future scientific leaders, from your path from being a researcher to now having multiple roles, including a dean and also program leader, what has been some of the pivotal experience or mentor that had shaped your approach to facilitating these different progresses in your various roles? And then
mm.
I guess if are there any advices that you wish you had earlier, but you didn't?
Oh yeah. Maybe sometimes you just wish you'd listen more to some of the advice, but it's another really terrific question. And if I think about my own professional path, those pivotal experiences so often occurred because there were people who were mentors, but they were also advocates. And there were individuals who saw potential in me and then took some responsibility in helping me to see that in myself. And so, as opposed to a very specific person or experience or time, the things that really helped me develop as a person, as a scientist, and as a leader were those times when there were individuals who did that for me, who saw something and helped me to see it in myself, and then also helped to, create those opportunities to exercise those talents. That's from my first undergraduate research experience to, senior faculty or senior scientists who gave me the opportunity to give a talk at a major meeting. So that's impacted how I think about my own leadership role. That role is to also do what I was fortunate enough that people did for me, which is to kind of help people unpack their own gifts, their own talents, and support them. And sometimes it's just reflecting back what people are thinking about who they want to be and how they want to achieve those goals, and then getting out of the way, but also being an advocate and finding ways of creating those pathways to support those goals and interests. So what's happened to me has really influenced kind of what I understand as important features of leadership. There's a quote from Maya Angelou that I think about a lot, that people will forget what you say and they'll forget what you do, but they won't forget how you make them feel. And so I think leadership is about really tuning in to how people can feel empowered to act on their passions, their values, and their talents. And I'm lucky that there were people who did that for me. What would I tell myself? What would I tell myself? I think I would tell myself, don't be afraid to take risks and not to be afraid to fail. And that's kind of easy to say in hindsight, but I think we're all driven and we want to do a good job and we don't want to fail, whatever that is. But not wanting to make mistakes or fail can often be an inhibition. I think, what was it, Einstein who said failure is success in progress. And so, I think that's what I would tell myself. Don't be afraid. It's not going to be the end of the world if you take a risk and it fails.
Yeah, I think that's something that I also kind of, hold on my right hand. Take risk. If you don't take it, you never know. You have to give people the opportunity to tell you no or yes. You can't tell yourself no, before you give it a shot. So I think that's a very good thing to always, work with. I think that also kind of drives us into the question I'm about to ask. When you mentioned talking about pedagogy and the Iraqda program for postdoc helping to teach and things like that. So my next question is currently, I mean, looking at how things are going and funding it's an issue right now. A lot of applications or a lot of things that I would say more of like student, postdoc, doctoral students are focused on. It's like, what's the next step? I just want to apply for something. And when you look at it, it's kind of a short-term application. Everyone just want to jump on the next train and figure out something. So how do you think, or what do you suggest scientific leaders should champion, or how do they better champion intrinsic values and long-term necessity for fundamental, curiosity-driven research? Because I think that's one thing that people always say, research goes with the money, or you go after the money, that's how we go. So how do you think will be best for, coming leaders, already, established scientific leaders that'll be watching this video, to kind of start developing this long-term fundamental, curiosity-driven research and maintaining it, within that course? And how do you make this case to funders? As I said, research goes with the money, and to the public and, within our institution specifically.
Excellent question. So, science is challenging, right? If it weren't, everybody would do it. Science can be challenging. And so, you have to find the thing that you get excited about that just drives your interest, your curiosity, and your passion in order to sustain through the times that it's working and it's see everything's falling into place, and then the times that it isn't, where the science is taking a turn you aren't expecting, or that you're having a hard time doing some set of experience. And so the thing that'll sustain you, right, is that if it's the thing you love, it's your passion, if you're driven by a question. If you're driven by the abstract idea that somebody else out there wants you to know the answer to some set of questions, that's a lot harder to get motivated by. And so thinking about this question of curiosity-driven science and applied science, I mean, the reality is there is no applied science without curiosity-driven research. Curiosity, powers discovery and innovation. And if we look at all the major advances in medicine and one very clear example of applied science, at the base of that is curiosity-driven research, someone seeing something and then asking why. And so, the things that make you ask the question why are going to be different than the things that make me ask the question why. And that's why when all of these why questions come together, you end up with 99% of the technologies that are FDA-approved trials. FDA-approved drugs and therapies. And so that's part of the case that we make for curiosity-driven science, that we just can't predict where science is going to go, but curiosity will be the path to getting there. So if I can also answer a slightly more abstract answer to that question, and thinking about what is the value of curiosity-driven science, maybe for society at large, communities and societies that develop systems to foster curiosity and exploration, science, are able to be more innovative and more resilient because that thirst for knowledge leads to better understanding of ourselves, better understanding of each other, and ways to change the status quo to make the world a better place. So not only can curiosity science be the pathway to applications that are transformative, but also just creates the opportunity to have really a functional, forward-moving society. And I think those are some of the cases that we have to be able to make better, not only to funders, but also to the public and to our political leadership, that it is absolutely crucial. And it's so much fun. I mean, asking a question and figuring out the tools to answer it, and then realizing that maybe you're the first person in the world to have the answer to this question that you have been dying to know the why. It's really wonderful.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Dr. Tracy. As we look around us, like most of the big discoveries are done, like they involve an element of mistakes, like someone did this mistake, someone did that mistake, but ultimately they are very curious to know, okay, why it's happening that way only. So they do research. It's their curiosity that's leading them to make those big discoveries.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's think about CRISPR, right? So it is one of the technologies that's changing not only how we do research, but like in terms of therapeutics. There's a researcher
Yes.
at UCLA who's using CRISPR technology, and I think we're now in a position to have a cure for sickle cell disease, which has been so difficult to confront. But where did CRISPR come from? It came from these strange sequences in the bacterial genome that somebody was like, why? And those sequences seem to offer some kind of bacterial immunity. I don't think the first person who found those sequences started thinking, oh my goodness, maybe this is going to lead to a cure to sickle cell disease. But it starts with curiosity, and it starts with asking why, and it starts with thinking about, what are the big questions, and allowing ourselves the space to ask them. I don't know, it gives me goosebumps. It's so much fun when you think about how science works and how we do
Yes.
it.
So now coming back to my question, so you have mentored so many young scientists. So when you think of the next coming decade, so what gives you the most optimism
Mm.
about the future of scientific leadership? And the other part of my question is, what's the challenge that still keeps you up at the night?
I'm fortunate that I teach undergraduates. I teach a lab for first year students. It's a lab class. It's super fun. Um, and the thing that gives me the most optimism is those times when I'm teaching and I see this passion and this optimism and this resilience and this excitement. And those are the things that keep me optimistic, that there is a whole generation of young people that, just like me and just like all of us, are driven by the excitement of wanting to know. And that I think is what really keeps me excited and fuels my optimism. And we have incredible tools. I mean, the tools are changing and evolving. Something like, I mean, AI is an obvious one. And how, with all of that passion and optimism and curiosity, and now with tools that, 10 years ago, we couldn't even imagine the things that we're going to be able to do, especially if we keep on supporting science, is just extraordinary. Um, the thing that keeps me up at night is something that we've alluded to, is my fear that if we keep making doing science so hard because it's so hard to get funding, or we send a message that science is an exclusionary club, that you only have to have a certain pedigree in order to be a welcome participant, or from a particular place, or have a particular background. My fear is that we will lose incredible talent and opportunity that we just can't even fathom. That's what keeps me up at night, and that's what motivates me to think about what kind of leadership do I need to have at this particularly important time? I don't know. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a very comprehensive question. And I think also for me, so I'm at an institute, so we only have graduate students. But even
Mhm.
when the new graduate students come, they started, I guess, last week. They're all so excited. And I have like kind of a student buddy, and just speaking with her and hearing about where she wants to go for rotations and what she's interested in doing, it also really excites me. So I definitely feel that. Feel that excitement that you do as well.
That's awesome.
hmm so I wanted to ask a bit about this UCLA HHMI Pathways to Success program, because when we were looking online, we were researching about you, we saw that it kind of had been initiated as part of your professorship. And
Mhm.
I guess the question that I have is kind of what inspired this program to be designed, and how has it evolved in the launch, and what do you think has
Mm.
been the impact on the students to kind of continue their careers in science, and long-term goals for them?
Well, it started from, I think, a kind of a troubling statistic, which was that when you look at the number of students who start with an intention of studying and getting STEM degrees, and these are at universities, and those that graduate with STEM degrees, there was a huge loss. And in some cases, less than half of the students who start with the ambition of studying in STEM were graduated with STEM degrees. And so one of the questions was, first of all, what is underlying that? And is there something that we can do? because clearly, and I will look at UCLA, and our statistics were a bit better than that, but still, there we were losing students, and it was disproportionately particular students from particular backgrounds. And so what I looked at the time was what is the source of the loss? And it's not because of, preparation or academic experiences were kind of a poor indicator of who was going to stay. But what was a good indicator is if there was a sense of scientific identity or a sense that students saw themselves as scientists. And so we thought, okay, let's try an experiment, right? We're scientists, we try experiments. What kind of structure, what can we do to foster that sense of belonging, but also that sense of like, what is it that we love about science so that we're experiencing that? And that's where the program come from. So one of the first things was like, the thing that many of us are drawn to is research. And so the early exposure to research in a classroom setting where you can ask a question and then we don't know the answer to it, but the whole lab class it's a research experience where the students have the practice of designing experiments and working collaboratively and thinking about how do you develop models to explain your results, go to seminars, talk to other scientists. And that's like we did some analysis. And after a course that was developed like that, the sense of scientific identity, the students were like, yeah, I'm a scientist. It's like, I just spent the whole quarter doing that. And it was awesome. Like, this is what they were saying in their reviews. So that's one thing, but being part of a community, because that's one of the things that is really core to being a scientist, being part of a scientific community where you're working with other people to think about answering questions. And also thinking about what are the entry course experiences and using some of the support from HHMI to kind of really rethink how we do intro courses and creating learning communities around those. So those were the initial, those are some of the activities, but that was the motivation for developing it. And we've had hundreds of students who've gone through the program, and I can say those who stay in STEM degrees and go on to STEM careers, it's about 98%, which is way higher than when we started and the things that kind of motivated it. And so the goal is just at UCLA now, I'm putting on my dean hat. One of my goals would be for those experiences that we piloted nicely in that program to embed those into the experiences of every single undergrad. Like if that's the dream. So we're working on that part. But that's a little bit about the program.
Yeah, for such a robust answer to that.
Sorry, I hope it wasn't too robust.
Nah, you're good. It was perfect. Okay, so that's going to lead to my next question. I would say kind of the last for this session. So what is one concrete action or mindset shift you believe could significantly strengthen scientific leadership across the community right now?
And thinking about particularly the needs, the needs for the scientific community at large, I'd say that we all have to. I know you invited me because of certain leadership activities that I've been involved in, but I'd say we all have to see our role, the role that we have to play in sustaining science, that we all are part of this leadership team, this collective leadership team for sustaining science, certainly, in the US, but our international scientific enterprise. We all have a role to play with that, play in that. And so I feel like that has to be a mindset shift so that it's not just the work that we're individually doing, but that once we understand what it is that drives our passion, thinking about the role that we all have to play in communicating what we do and sustaining the scientific enterprise more broadly. It kind of goes
Yeah.
back to the question you asked earlier about what keeps me up at night. Like we have to do this together, and everybody has a role to play in order for us to really keep moving forward.
That was a very nice conclusion, very uplifting and community oriented, which I really love and I think is so important in science. Um, Thank you so much. We feel like we've learned, at least from my end, I'm sure that others agree with me, so much already from
Mm.
being able to have the privilege of interviewing you today. So these were kind of our general questions, and we would now like to move into our more rapid fire questions. So the idea
Ooh,
of the
okay.
rapid fire is that we will all ask kind of a brief question to you, and if you could answer in a word or a sentence, that would kind of be the ideal goal. So we would
Okay.
just quickly go through six-ish questions. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing these final answers. So
Okay.
I'll kick it off with the first question. What is one quality every great leader should have?
Courage.
Okay, so what's the most exciting development in genomics right now?
Single cell RNA-seq.
Okay, we've kind of shifted. What three traits should young scientists be right now to keep the fire going?
Ooh, resilience.
What's your go-to strategy for staying motivated during tough times?
Ooh, finding community and spending time with it.
Who has been one of the most influential leaders in your own career?
Ooh, this is hard for one word, but I'd say my academic and my research mentors as a group. And they model joy and the fun of asking hard questions. If I had to name one person, I'd say my postdoc advisor totally embodied it, and that was John Abelson at Caltech.
Okay, so what's one bizarre tradition you would change about the current academic system?
Weeding out and gatekeeping, particularly in introductory science courses. No weeders, no gatekeeping.
That concludes our rapid fire questions. And Dr. Johnson, just on behalf of the entire Community and Membership Engagement Subcommittee and also the ECOP, thank you so much for sharing your time, experience, and wisdom with us today. And I'm sure our conversation will resonate with a lot of folks, and we're excited to share it with the public soon. And thank you again for not only leading through I guess your work but also for inspiring the next generation of scientists, including the four of us here, to lead with purpose and really just integrity. And that concludes today's Leadership Dialogue series. And thank you again, Dr. Johnson, and thank you to everyone who will be watching virtually.